Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here. First of all, welcome everybody to the webinar, Making Sense of CBD. My name is Cynthia Agresta, and I'm excited to kick off what promises to be a very enlightening hour. A couple of quick notes as we get started. We are expecting a large group this morning, so everybody should be coming on in mute mode so that we don't hear some background noise. But please know, if you're new to Zoom, there is a chat panel that you can access at the bottom of your screen. As a matter of fact, why don't you open up your chat panel for a second and just try it out. Maybe tell us where you are calling in from. Excellent. Okay, so I see people, and can you hear us okay? If you would just let me know as well. We've got people from New Mexico, Canada, Ohio, New York City, British Columbia. Great. Okay, I want to tell you that we did get quite a few questions that were submitted before as part of the registration process, and we are trying to work in the answers to some of those questions in the presentation. But I'm also excited to tell you that we have Jim Sharkey, who is the head of science at Acesso, who's going to be monitoring the chat panel and kind of answering questions as we go. We do have a few minutes at the end reserved for Q&A as well. So feel free to chat and send along your questions. And then finally, we are recording this event. So we'll make that recording available by the end of the week. So getting started, hemp is now legal on a federal level, and we probably don't need to tell you it's making the buzz about CBD even bigger. There's been an explosion of products, retail distribution, claims, articles, websites, and your patients are probably coming to you to make sense of it all. Even if you've studied the science behind CBD and are ready to integrate it into your practice, there's a lot to know when it comes to selecting the right supplements and guiding your patients through their most beneficial use. Today, our presenters will walk you through the plant to product process, sharing how supplements are designed so that CBD is delivered with the highest health impact. So please meet our presenters. First, we have Eileen Konieczki, who's been an RN for more than 25 years and is a board-certified patient advocate. She became interested in medical cannabis and developed a deep understanding of the endogenous cannabinoid system, ECS, while searching for alternatives to her sister's breast cancer. She spent the last decade helping patients navigate the often confusing landscape of cannabis and hemp. Eileen is also the author of Healing with CBD, How Cannabidiol Can Transform Your Health Without the High. The book was released last October and is already in its second printing, and you can get a copy on Amazon.com. Eileen is our expert on the science and the use of patient care. Second, we have Kurt Forstman, who is the Hemp Division VP at Dixie Brands. Kurt is our expert on the commercialization and sale of hemp supplements. He has worked in the cannabis space since marijuana was first fully legalized in Colorado. Since 2014, his focus has been on the hemp CBD side of the industry, developing hemp-infused products for people and pets. He is expert in the complexities of product development from sourcing to selling CBD. And I will now turn the conversation over to Eileen.
I think Eileen may be muted, Cynthia. You may have to unmute her.
There we go. Sorry about that. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. This quote is written by Michael Moskowitz, who is the author of Medical Cannabis, A Guide for Patients, Practitioners, and Caregivers. And I find it to be one of my most favorite quotes. Chances are that a number of you have patients that are asking you about CBD, and you already may be recommending it. Considerable interest and around CBD, around its neuroprotective, anti-epileptic, anxiolytic, antipsychotic, and anti-inflammatory properties is certainly what's pushing the conversation. CBD interacts in the brain, but it is not psychoactive in the same manner that THC is. And this is what is making it so compelling for so many patients and practitioners. The endocannabinoid system, which is the system that oversees how cannabinoids interact and work in our body, is relatively new to us. It was only discovered in the early 1990s, and it's responsible for homeostasis, a stable internal environment despite fluctuations that happen in our external environment. CB1 receptors are found throughout the brain, and cannabinoids cross the blood-brain barrier. And as Cynthia said in my intro, you know, that's what really drove me to understanding cannabis, cannabinoids, and this system. Because as you know, as well as I do, crossing the blood-brain barrier isn't an easy thing to do. So CB1 receptors are found throughout our brain in areas that control motor coordination, cognition, pain, memory, and nausea. And again, CBD does not bind to CB1 receptors in our brain, so it does not cause the euphoria associated with cannabis use. It acts on other types of receptors, including our 5-HT1A, which helps regulate sleep, mood, appetite, and pain. And it's an agonist at our TRPV receptors, which are vital in regulating pain. CB2 receptors are found throughout the body, around the spleen, the liver, immune cells, spinal cord, throughout our gut, throughout our skin. And the sheer nature of the endocannabinoid system makes it a unique system to target medical applications.
Hi, this is Kurt. So thanks, Eileen. So as our understanding and awareness of CBD grows throughout the country, so goes the market. Market estimates are ranging anywhere from 2 billion to 20 billion by 2022. CBD and hemp are truly becoming mainstream this year, and that's mostly the result of the Farm Bill, which passed late last year, which is providing larger access for healthcare practitioners as well as general retail to carry CBD. Hemp is going from niche to mainstream this year, and 2019 is truly going to be the year of hemp. We're talking to clinicians and retailers, and you're really going to see it go mainstream. You're going to see it in places like Walgreens, Walmart, CVS by the end of the year. So this is going to be the year for hemp. Here are some pictures of products, some of which I'm sure you're familiar with. You know, everything from all the various ingestion methods, from vape to topical. There's products for pets, there's products for humans, tinctures, sprays, gums. There's a plethora of products on the market right now. And part of this presentation is to help you kind of choose which are the best products on the market, which are the most compliant products on the market, because there are a lot of competitors out there. Next slide. So this is breaking down the market growth through 2022. Right now, it's pretty much composed of marijuana-derived CBD preparations, and that's CBD derived from medical marijuana plants. And those are grown, produced, and distributed in licensed medical marijuana schemes in states with some form of recreation or medical marijuana. The other type of hemp is CBD is hemp-derived. That's what we're talking about today. Hemp-derived comes from the industrial hemp plant, which is not marijuana. Industrial hemp is defined as the cannabis plant containing less than 0.3% or 0.3%, less than 0.3% THC by dry weight. So hemp-derived comprises the majority of products in the market now, and that's what you're seeing being sold over supplement counters at practitioners as well as retail stores. Epidiolex, which you may be familiar with, is the first formal drug approval for CBD that was done in Q4 of last year. Greenwich Biosciences got Epidiolex approved as a pharmaceutical product through the FDA, It's used for seizures and intractable epilepsy, things like Dravet syndrome. So that market is just starting to take off. But we anticipate as the market matures, more and more pharma companies, not just GW and Greenwich Biosciences, but more and more pharma companies will get into the space, and it'll look a lot different by 2022. It'll be more evenly divided. And kind of the big takeaway from that slide is that access. Right now, patient access is pretty limited to just e-commerce and dispensaries, but as the market expands, you're literally going to be able to buy CBD products everywhere. That's a good thing and a bad thing. But this chart here, this pie chart, kind of shows where we are in 2017, 2 years ago, with most of hemp and CBD being sold online and in places like smoke shops and natural specialty stores. And you'll notice the purple is practitioner, healthcare practitioners is only 5% of the market in 2017. As time goes on, expect that to greatly increase. That will literally quintuple in size. So that is really relevant to naturopaths because we look at the naturopath as the ultimate partner with patients. You know, cannabis is a medicine that you self-titrate, and it's best administered with the help of a healthcare practitioner. So naturopaths and doctors, everyone in the healthcare world, really play a strong role in properly using these products and administering them correctly. So you guys have a big burden on your shoulders as time goes on to provide better access. So let's get to the Farm Bill. So the Farm Bill passed in December of last year. It's the single biggest piece of legislation impacting the industry. Up until the passing of the Farm Bill, hemp and CBD legal status was really comprised of a patchwork of laws, case law precedent, and FDA rulings. As well, no one really knew if the DEA controlled it or if the FDA controlled it. So the Farm Bill seeks to unify those gray laws and make it clear to provide pathways for participation. So what does this mean? So industrial hemp, which I mentioned before, is the cannabis sativa species that contains below 0.3% THC by weight. If it contains more than 0.3% THC, that's considered marijuana. Marijuana and hemp are the exact same plant. The only difference between the two is THC content. So the Farm Bill pulled out industrial hemp from the controlled substances definition of marijuana. So hemp is no longer part of the CSA. What that also means is that it's firmly out of the hands of the DEA. Hemp is no longer in the jurisdiction of the DEA, and it's squarely into the hands of the FDA. And when the Farm Bill talks about hemp, they talk about all of its extracts, any derivatives, salts, isomers, or cannabinoids. So the Farm Bill, the authors of the Farm Bill were smart enough to recognize things like CBD with medicinal value, but no psychoactive benefit should not be under the purview of the DEA. So what this means is it provides for regulation by the FDA. It provides for interstate commerce of hemp over state lines. And it puts the FDA firmly in jurisdiction of hemp. So what this means is that hemp, there are pathways right now that the FDA provides for companies to participate in the space, and they're called nutritional supplements. The FDA very famously said no CBD in food. It's strictly forbidden because CBD is not a GRAS ingredient or generally recognized as safe. But in a supplement, you don't need GRAS ingredients. So the pathway for supplements is still permissible by the FDA, which means as time goes on, more and more hemp companies are going to have to comply with the FDA and DSHEA. And I hand it back to Eileen.
So for sourcing CBD, in order to talk about the source of CBD, we really need to have a little bit of background on the plant itself. So let's talk about cannabis sativa or hemp. So hemp is a hardy plant. that grows like a weed just about anywhere. It's an annual crop with a relatively deep and extensive root structure, allowing it to probe widely through the soil. Hemp produces a relative abundance of bushy biomass in a very short period of time. Hemp and cannabis are the plants, they're bioaccumulators, which means that they can pull toxins out of the soil. When the plants are harvested, cured, and extracted, any of those toxins or contaminants that were present in the soil will be present in the plant, and when extracted and concentrated, can be passed along to consumers, exposing them to unsafe levels of mercury, lead, and other potentially harmful substances. So CBD is found in the trichomes, which are developed on the leaves and flowers of the plant. This is important because industrial hemp plants, which grow tall and lanky, have very few flowers, while medicinal hemp strains develop an abundance of branches and flowers. So the more flowers you have on a plant, the more CBD and the less contaminants. So understanding what type of plant that has made your product is important, as well as how it's grown and where it's grown. All of this affects the end product. CBD products bought on the internet and claim that they're legal in all 50 states use imported hemp or Farm Bill compliant domestically grown hemp. That's for now. In 2017, a total of 23,343 acres of hemp was cultivated across 19 states. So to keep up with consumer demand, many CBD manufacturers rely on hemp grown abroad and produce their products and tinctures and capsules from that. So it's really important to understand where your hemp is, where your products are made from, and what the source material is, so you can understand what things that you need to look after. So whether there's lead or mercury or different things like that, you always have to ask for test results. So there's a wide variety of products, an array of delivery methods, and one size certainly doesn't fit all when it comes to products. So I want to talk about the different delivery methods and what's on the horizon for CBD. So first we're going to talk about topicals. I'll touch on this a bit. So the onset of action with a topical, so it provides local relief. Its onset is within 5 to 15 minutes. Quite honestly, and the duration lasts for anywhere from 2 to 3 hours. Again, it's got localized relief. There's a number of CB2 receptors that are found throughout the skin and layers of the dermis. You'll see on the future transdermal patches that are going to be coming on the market, which provide for a sustained release over multiple hours of time. They have a little reservoir in the patch. So that's some technology that I'm looking forward to seeing for patients, so they don't have to worry about putting product on their arms and hands and ankles and knees frequently. Inhalation is another great delivery method. As a healthcare practitioner, I never recommend smoking anything, but inhalation has some of the best statistics here. You can feel the effects within seconds to minutes. You have a peak effect in 10 to 15 minutes. The duration is in 2 hours, and the bioavailability of inhalation is around 35%. This is great for titration and for getting people to understand how cannabinoids, whether it be THC or CBD, how they actually work, what they expect to feel. And it's wonderful for titrating because it only works for about 2 to 4 hours. So unlike the other delivery methods that we're going to talk about, like ingestion and eating a gummy, those effects last for a longer period of time. So for people to understand how cannabinoids work, inhalation is a great first step. And then we have sublingual. Sublingual administration, as you know, under the tongue. Onset of action is about 15 to 30 minutes. The duration lasts for about 4 to 6 hours. The bioavailability of this is about 6 to 20%. And that's because, you know, for the majority of patients, they can only hold the tincture under their tongue for a period of time, and not all of those compounds can cross that membrane, the mucosal, and get into the bloodstream. So basically it's swallowed, and then it has to go through your digestion and then metabolized through the liver. And when it goes into the liver, it's metabolized by the same family of enzymes that are responsible for metabolizing 60% of prescription drugs, the cytochrome P450 family of enzymes. So here you can definitely see drug-to-drug interactions if you have patients that are on multiple pharmaceuticals. So it's really important to understand what delivery methods that your patients are using, and it's important for you to understand and pay attention to the medications that they're using. I've seen a number of patients be able to decrease the amount of pharmaceuticals that they're taking when they include cannabinoid medicines in their protocol. Ingestion, so I talked a little bit about ingestion. So for ingestion, onset of action can take anywhere from 30 to 90 minutes. The duration lasts for 6 to 8 hours, and the bioavailability there is 6 to 15%. And again, the technologies and things that we're hoping to see coming through the pipeline are better ways to improve the bioavailability of a product. So it's great to take a gummy, but most gummies will have, 5, maybe 10 milligrams of CBD in them. Well, if you're only getting a tiny amount of that, we want to be able to make sure that, patients are putting their dollars to good use. So, Kurt, can you talk a little bit about some of the things that we see in the future?
Yeah, so I think, really quickly, so the CBD hemp oil are lipids, which is essentially an oil. So they're what's known as hydrophobic, and they don't mix well with water or much less the bloodstream. So they're really hard to pass through the liver, get into the bloodstream, and eventually attach themselves to cell walls where they can start having their benefit because they're lipids, they're oily. So some of the technologies that are being pioneered right now in product development are things like nano-sizing. I'm sure you guys have heard of nano-sizing. What that essentially means is shearing the particles of CBD in the oil to 100 nanometers or less, basically shrinking those particles really small so they pass through membranes more readily. So that's one method of doing it, is nano encapsulation, they sometimes call it. Another method is hydroencapsulation. So again, CBD is a lipid, cannabinoids are lipids, and water encapsulation is the process by which the particles are surrounded by a watery envelope, which bond better and get into the bloodstream faster, because you're essentially tricking the bloodstream into thinking this is an aqueous substance rather than a liquid. And I don't proclaim to know how that technology is performed, but that's something that's emerging now, is nano encapsulation and water encapsulation as means to increase bioavailability.
Thanks, Kurt.
So let's get into labeling and testing. And I'm just following the chat a little here, and I noticed, sublingual, the question about sublingual. So when we talk about form factors and administration in this deck, it's all forms. It's drug form versus supplement form. So the reality is, for better or for worse, the majority of the products in the market now are tinctures, which to be properly administered have to be administered sublingually under the tongue. And to the caller, you are correct. That is a medicinal route of administration. So it should come as no surprise that a majority of these products out there right now are not compliant. It's literally the Wild West with CBD. So people are, mixing medicinal terms and nutritional supplement terms. They have non-standardized labeling. So that's why labeling is so important as we move forward. So it is the Wild West. There's no agency currently regulating hemp and CBD. It's regulated at the state level in various degrees. But our feeling is that as time goes on, the FDA is going to promulgate more clarity and more laws to hemp companies to get everything standardized. So while it's the Wild West right now, expect standardization to be more the norm as time goes on. You know, these are best practices nutritional supplement companies have used for ages, yet they're just now being adopted into hemp and CBD. So you need to be really careful about how you select your products. So let's start with labeling and testing. So as I said, there's no standardized labeling now. So companies label their products differently. And it's kind of a decoding exercise to figure out how much active content is actually in the product. It's challenging and confusing. So here are a couple examples. So if you look at the label on the left, this is a gummy. It very clearly says 25 milligrams of CBD per each gummy. The label in the middle is more of a standardized supplement fact panel that uses the terminology broad spectrum hemp extract. Some people say that instead of CBD, and we'll get into that a little later. But that's trying to denote active content. So the label in the middle has 10 milligrams of active CBD. That's what that's trying to say. And then finally, the third label on the right is the label I actually love because it shows how much hemp extract is in the product, and within that hemp extract, how much of that is active. So one of the big differences in, one of the confusions in labeling is, are you measuring gross amount of oil, or are you actually reporting amount of active content? And that's confusing. There is no standardization of labels there. So what you need to look for is are labels that are finely defined. So here's another picture. The tincture's on the front. It's listing total actives. The Restore tincture here is listing 1,200 milligrams. So the question is that hemp oil or is that active content? Well, we don't really know. And that's to my point. It's confusing. So I think what these vendors are trying to say is that there's 1,200 milligrams of active CBD in this tincture. But again, this is a decoding exercise. This is learning how to smartly read labels so that you can make good decisions for your patients. But as you can see, it's got some ways to go. It's no standardization. It's all across the board. And then at the bottom, we show active content per serving, 40 milligrams per serving. But let's go to the next slide. So FDA, as we were saying before, our opinion is the FDA, the FDA has stated they're going to clean up the laws, make it easier for companies to participate in the CBD space. CBD and hemp supplements can exist now under DSHEA, which is the Dietary Supplement Health Education Act, which you're all familiar with. That's the guidebook for marketing and manufacturing of nutritional supplements. That's a great document. It's a great rule book. It exists. So our feeling is they're going to start modifying parts of DSHEA to accommodate CBD and hemp. But there's already pathways now for hemp providers who follow DSHEA to be in total compliance. So what does compliance mean for products? So generally, one of the baseline requirements is supplements need to be made in a GMP compliant facility. That stands for good manufacturing practices. If they're not made in a GMP compliant facility, I would tend to stay away from those hemp and CBD products. When you purchase these products, ask for the certifications. See if your manufacturer can prove up their GMP compliance. Most GMP is done by third-party auditors. They provide a certificate. So it's pretty easy to see if the facility is GMP compliant. We talked about standardized nutritional labeling before. There's a big need to standardize labels and information on packaging because it's still the Wild West. Some of the better companies now follow DSHEA and use that standardized, supplement fact panels, but a vast majority of companies don't. And that makes it confusing to the caregiver and the consumer to make good choices. What also is important is batch codes for traceability. Any product you buy should have a unique batch or control number on it. It should be on the box or it should be on the bottle the product comes in. That's for recall and traceability purposes. That's absolutely mandatory to have a batch control number on every CBD product you buy. That's also part of being GMP compliant. Expiration dates are important. every product you buy should be clearly labeled with an expiration date. Most expirations you see are a year to 2 years, but if a product does not have any expiration information, I would think twice about getting that product. UPC codes kind of is obvious to all of us. You know, that UPC is what's used in the supplement industry, but weirdly enough, or not surprisingly enough, the majority of hemp companies still don't utilize these best practices from the supplement industry like UPC. And then finally, testing transparency. So the most important thing requiring hemp products is to validate safety of the product. And we're going to get into some tests here on the next couple slides. So there were some questions earlier about organic hemp. This is not a mandatory, but it's kind of a nice to have. Until hemp was legal at the federal level in the US, it was hard to get organic certification. Very few companies out there were able to get organic certification. That's going to change now that hemp is legal at the federal level. So it's kind of an outlier now, but as time goes on, more and more companies can become organic. And next slide. So this is probably the most important test. This is a potency test. This is what you use to validate the actual contents of the product to make sure the label is echoing what's in reality. So it's important to see potency tests not only for CBD content, but also for THC content or absence of THC. So this is probably the single most important test you want to get to validate potency. Next slide. So here are some other potency tests. The one on the left shows THC that exceeds the legal limit. That's showing 0.5% THC, which is above the legal limit to be called industrial hemp. This is marijuana. Technically, this is marijuana, what this test says, which means you should not accept that product because it's not legal. The test on the right is an example of the presence of THC content, yet it still falls below the minimum limit. So this would still be considered industrial hemp because the THC, when it's added up, equates to below 0.3% THC. So it's still allowed to be an industrial hemp products, but it has to be below that 0.3% number. Moving forward. Here's another very, very important test. This is heavy metals. So as Eileen was saying earlier, hemp is a bioaccumulator. It's literally like a sponge, and it soaks up the ambient toxins in the soil that's adjacent to it. So hemp is actually used as a phytoremediant in environmentally impaired sites like Fukushima, like the Japanese planted hemp all around Fukushima to soak up metals and radiation in the soil. So hemp is like a sponge, and you need to be really, really careful about heavy metals and what's contained in hemp. Now, every state has their limits of heavy metals. There's a small trace amount that's allowed in each plant, in each product, that's defined by the state. So let's go to pesticides or residual solvents. So residual solvents is another big one. Every state has their own minimum risk levels for residual solvents. So all solvents are used to extract hemp oil from industrial hemp. There's some low risk solvents like ethanol, and then there's higher risk solvents like hexene and benzene. Obviously, you want to try to buy products that don't have any of these solvents in them. Most extraction methods provide for total burn off and collection of solvents. But there's still going to be trace amounts. There's likely going to be trace amounts of solvents in all your hemp products. So you need to validate the limits against your state limits. So it's very important to get residual solvents testing. Microbials, moving on to microbials. So this is another very important test. This is part of being GMP compliant. Microbials are bacterials that grow on the product. So this is for finished goods. So you can test inputs for microbials, but most people test their finished goods. Most manufacturers test finished goods for microbials. This is absolutely mandatory for buying hemp products if they're in a GMP compliant facility. The manufacturer should be able to show you microbial report by batch number. If you look, it says lot number 2018163. You know, that's that batch control number I was talking about. But this is very important to make sure the products are safe for human consumption, microbial testing. Next slide. So the FDA is expected to promulgate more rules, make it easier for people to participate in hemp. But this is all pretty much 101 stuff to you. You know, if we're making this stuff, if these products live as supplements in the US, certain things need to happen for them to be made supplements. And marketing is one of the most important things. You know, the FDA, the goal is to have truth in marketing and truth in labeling for the FDA so that consumers can make the right choice. You know, we're not drugs. We haven't done you know, expensive clinical trials where we can actually make disease statements or health claims or even use words like dose or anxiety or treat or prevent or cure. So it's really important that compliant hemp products are labeled properly. And the big controversy now is around, what do you call it, CBD or do you call it hemp? So a little background on this. So CBD is without question how we refer to this product in the colloquial manner. When we talk about these products, we say CBD. People are searching for CBD on Google. That's the term they use. However, in reality, to call these products CBD is actually a misclass. These products are hemp oil products that contain naturally occurring CBD. To call them CBD is to call them a drug, because CBD is an approved drug via the Epidiolex trial right now. So as time goes on, you're gonna see the CBD terminology disappear, we believe, because that's the purview of the drug companies, and you're gonna see more and more use of the term hemp, full spectrum hemp oil, broad spectrum hemp oil products, because that's what it is. It's a hemp oil product. It's not 100% CBD. It's actually a very low concentration of CBD that make up these products. So when people call these products CBD in their marketing, they're misclassifying them as drugs. Same thing with disease terminology. You can't mention any disease terms in your marketing claims or your language or your labeling, or the FDA considers it an unauthorized drug. And then we have the just say no words of diagnose, treat, cure, and prevent. So where is the industry headed? So you're going to recognize some of these badges on this slide. As hemp goes from niche into mainstream, these types of attributes are going to take on more and more importance. You're kind of seeing a little of this now in the hemp world. You're going to see a lot of this by the time the year's out as hemp goes mainstream. So these are things that are important to consumers, but also important for consumer safety. So they're selling attributes, but also safety attributes. We have things like grain-free, certified organic, full spectrum hemp oil, non-GMO. We talked about testing transparency, FDA compliance, and GMP compliance. But expect to see hemp companies installing these types of badges and driving themselves to this level of compliance as 2019 goes on. So that's a mouthful. I will hand that off to Eileen now to talk about clinical application.
Thanks, Kurt. And I just want to say one thing about the labeling and what we're going to see in the future and how things aren't going to say CBD on them and how it could be a hemp extract or a phytocannabinoid blend. Really what that's going to do for the consumer and the practitioner is put some onus on you as to do the research to actually find out at how much CBD is in that product. These patients and consumers are purchasing them because of the cannabidiol that's in them for the most part, or some of the minor cannabinoids. but you're going to have to do a little bit of legwork to, you know, request the test results. I see future thinking companies that have batch results on their website already to make that easy for the consumer and the practitioner to find products that you would want, you know, your grandma to use. So here I'm going to do a really high level talk about the clinical applications of CBD. The World Health Organization, you know, came out in 2017, 18 with a critical report to say that, you know, CBD is a safe substance. It has zero potential abuse. It has zero public health risk. It is not habit forming, and it's well tolerated in humans. So we see the consumers in this market, you know, you have general wellness consumers who care about their health. They read labels, they prefer alternatives to traditional medicines. And then you see the ailing consumer who has chronic condition and is, you know, has a number of conditions that are, you know, perhaps pain related or anxiety related. They search on the internet for their information. They enjoy having things that are delivered straight to their home because they probably have limitations in their mobility to get places. So, you know, there's two definite markets that I see for this for who are using CBD. Back in, this was a 2017 survey by the Hello MD community of 24,000 patients. 2,400 patients were surveyed, and it came back with 42% of them had used CBD. 88% of them said that it was very or extremely effective, and 42% of those were able to switch from over-the-counter products like Tylenol and also drop some of their traditional prescription drugs like Vicodin. So CBD definitely does work when you think about the endocannabinoid system and where all these receptors are, and the fact that, you know, we don't eat as well as we used to, and we don't have as many endogenous cannabinoids floating around in our bodies. You can see how, you know, a little bit of CBD can certainly help go a long way. So factors in considering suggesting products, you know, how much should I take? When I talk about, so start low, go slow, stay low, you know, that's the mantra for cannabinoids, particularly those that have THC in them. But start low, go slow could also be relevant with CBD for patients who are polypharma. So when they're taking 3, 4, or 5 different medications, remember how I said that when this gets digested, it goes through the CYP4 enzyme, and so there's interactions that occur there. So you really want to pay attention to that. But other factors include, you know, the desired outcome, what the patient's looking to do, the cost of the medicine. This stuff is not cheap. How convenient it is for them to use it, how often they have to use it in a day, and basically the bioavailability, you know, how well it's working in the body that they take. So very common side effects are, you know, what I've seen personally is, you know, some diarrhea, some fatigue, some sleepiness. That sleepiness is actually not necessarily a bad side effect. I have a lot of patients who use CBD to help them sleep. Cannabinoids inherently are biphasic. At low doses, they do one thing, and at high doses, they do another. But so other side effects could be, there could be a change of weight, a change of appetite. And for patients who have epilepsy, we've seen an increase of seizures with the onset of CBD use, and we think that that has to do with, and when I say we, it's myself and some of my colleagues, we think that it has to do with the effects of the seizure medications that they're on. So drugs that can decrease the bioavailability of CBD are pentobarbital, rifampicin, carbamazepine, and fentanyl. And the reverse is also true. So CBD can have opioid sparing effects. So you can use less drug. And with warfarin particularly, so for your older patients who are on Coumadin, you really need to monitor those levels in the beginning first. It's kind of like kale. So, you know, if somebody's using something over time, your body gets adjusted to it, and then you don't have to worry about the INR and the fluctuations of the blood results and the thinning of the blood. But you definitely have to watch out for it in the beginning. So let's hit with, again, very high level. For neurological conditions like Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, Alzheimer's, and any movement disorders. So we see an improvement in rigidity and tremors with Parkinson's disease, decrease in spasm and pain for multiple sclerosis. It has neuroprotective, anti-inflammatory, and antioxidant effects as well in the brain, and it can decrease the underlying nerve damage. There was research done on a small cohort of Parkinson's disease patients, and it found that just 300 milligrams of CBD a day improved their well-being and their quality of life. So that's a great thing. For GI, we have an abundance of CB2 receptors throughout our guts. It's a key modulator in gut inflammation. It decreases the activation of T cells, it decreases hypermotility, and it decreases inflammation. For cancer, now we have a tremendous amount of eyes that are looking at cannabinoids in the treatment of cancer and the help with the side effects of chemotherapy treatments and things like that. So we have in vitro and in vivo models that are shown to inhibit the growth of many tumor types as well as the ability to metastasize. It's something big to look at. I have a number of patients. This is where cannabinoids really do shine. You know, when you're taking chemotherapy, and as an oncology nurse, I never recommend anybody not take chemotherapy or standard treatments. But I always encourage patients to utilize cannabinoids as a way to help your body reboot after the side effects of the chemo. So it can help with your gut, it can help with your nausea, and all of those things. So for pain, the endocannabinoid system is a therapeutic target for osteoarthritis. We have receptors throughout our body, and they play a physiological role in the regulation of pain, inflammation, and joint function. So in addition to cannabinoids, omega-3s and 6s, which are the building blocks of our body's own endogenous cannabinoids, are particularly helpful for pain symptoms. And I know somebody had sent a question early before this that talked about non-diabetic neuropathy. I personally have neuropathy and have used CBD with great relief. It works differently than any other medication that I've used. So I definitely, because of the safety profile of cannabinoids, and particularly CBD, it's one of the first things that I recommend to many of my, patients, family members, anybody who will listen. And then, here's the children. So, a tenet of U.S. healthcare is first, do no harm. And this really should be considered a first-line treatment for kids. We're seeing amazing results of using CBD and helping children who are on the spectrum. I have stories of patients who are going to school for the first time, have stopped their stimming behavior, have stopped their self-harming behavior. It really should be considered, it really shouldn't be considered a last option. I know a number of children who use cannabinoids who are dealing with, horrible conditions, cancer, and any of these big chronic conditions. Please excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. It's all to say that, children are just, little bodies, and they really can be helped with using cannabinoids, and, trying to get over the stigma is certainly a step that we need to take. And of course, seizures. We talked about that earlier. It's really what puts CBD on the map. There was a child at Charlotte Figge who started using CBD and really, you know, catapulted this conversation into the mainstream media. It does work really well, and we have Epidiolex as a pharmaceutical because of that. But I will say, the pharmaceutical the pharmaceutical CBD, there's a small cohort, there's a research study that was done that shows that the pharmaceutical CBD, so it's an isolate of CBD, it works, but it's the effectiveness starts to wane after around the 6-month mark. And what we're seeing is that some of these other blends, some of these other cannabis blends actually do help when the pharmaceutical no longer does. So it's the entourage effects, it's the whole plant medicine and these minor cannabinoids and terpenes and flavonoids that really could make a difference for some of these children. And then the last condition is, you know, anxiety and depression. The majority of cited reasons for using CBD is this. It activates the serotonin 5-HT1A receptor, causing a relaxing effect. I have a number of patients who, and the thing with this is, if you have a patient that is trying CBD or is using CBD for anxiety or depression, and it's not working, I would imagine that the first thing that you need to do is perhaps either you change the CBD brand, but before changing the CBD brand, because again, it's the entourage, it's the other pieces that come along with it, increase the dose. Research is showing that this helps as an anti-anxiolytic at high doses, 300 milligrams and above. So we don't know a lot about the dosing. We don't have a lot of research yet. You know, we're just scratching the surface on what the potential of this is. But because the safety profile of this is what it is, it allows patients and practitioners to kind of play with it, to have the capabilities of, you know, upping a dose and, you know, not worrying about, you know, significant side effects, not worrying about, you know, having to take blood levels for particular conditions and things. So it's really worth taking a look at.
Eileen and Kurt, thank you so much. This brings us to sort of the end of the presentation of material. I know that there have been some chatting and some questions going back and forth in the chat panel. And we do have a few minutes left here for questions at the end. One of the questions, I think, Eileen, you may have just addressed it around the entourage effect. And the second question I think that we've seen before this session that came in as part of registration is about terpenes. So can I turn that to the two of you to talk a little bit more about terpenes?
Oh, sure. So, Karen, I'll hit this one first. So, you know, across the board, these terpenes, and they're found in really minor amounts. What I have found, and it's the product. It depends on the product and where it comes from. When a patient says that they've tried CBD or they've used CBD and it doesn't do anything, the first thing that I try to do is try to understand, well, is it an isolate? Because isolated CBD really doesn't do a whole heck of a lot, in my personal opinion, what I've seen. So for what I've seen, isolated CBD doesn't provide the kind of medical applications or help that you would want to see. So I switch patients over to a full spectrum hemp oil, and they seem to get a better response. So it has to do with, you know, and when you're talking about full spectrum, it's CBD, it's CBDA, there could be some CBG in there. And these are compounds, you know, cannabis has over 100 cannabinoids to it. These compounds are found in minor amounts, but it's those minor amounts that we don't know enough about yet. So it's really important for me, like when I ask people to try CBD, that they're using a full spectrum plant-based medicine. And then I worry about dosing with that. And dosing can get kind of tricky. So there's another rule of thumb, start low, go slow. But the European Hemp Association believes that there's some guidelines from them. CBD is so safe and has so little side effects that they say, and the majority of conditions that are helped with this, it all really stems down to inflammation. We have so much inflammation in our bodies that they believe that starting off in higher amounts in the beginning is the way to do it. So hundreds of milligrams of CBD, and then after a month or 2 or 3, to decrease the amount of CBD that they use after that, because then you've addressed the inflammation, you've gotten the inflammation under control. So it really depends on the condition you're trying to treat and the person, because then I can also turn around and say, I've had people that have done great with just, taking a 20 milligram gummy. So, Kurt?
Eileen, there was also a question about Hashimoto's. Can you comment on CBD as a treatment for that?
I can't. I can look it up, and so if I can't answer a question, I will be happy to take your information, do a little deep dive on that, and get back to you in an email, if that would be okay, because I can't talk to that specifically.
There's a fair amount of dosing related questions, which probably isn't appropriate for this forum. We're trying to keep this a little higher level. But as Eileen said, if you want to interface with us through my email, this is Kurt, it was on the invite, we can route that and get you the information you need. There's a ton of research obviously out there on trials which have ranges of dosing by indication for just about every indication that's out there. We're happy to provide that information to you if you want to hit us up on email afterwards looking for that.
Oh, but let me jump. So Monica asked about children with ADHD and the dosage that should be calculated by body weight or symptom. So cannabinoids don't work like body weight. So it's a lot of the research that you'll see, they're using a lot of research, they'll do kilograms per milligram, but we don't have all of that yet. A lot of the clinicians that I know and practitioners I know dose by symptom. So, pick a symptom and address that. And normally, we all know that nobody sleeps real well. And so CBD for sleep, it has that anxiolytic effect to it. It's relaxing. Sometimes addressing sleep as a major issue is one of the first places that I start, and you'd be amazed at how many other symptoms kind of or other complaints kind of fall away after that. But I don't really do cannabinoids by body weight. I do it more by symptom.
So to add to the ADHD question, there's a popular doctor out there named David Bierman, Bearman, who specializes in cannabinoids and ADHD. And he uses the AD theory, abnormal dopamine theory. ADHD is the result of the body not producing enough dopamine, or the dopamine doesn't stay resonant in the body long enough, and it gets uptaked too quickly. So and this is just a theory from Dr. Berman, that CBD interacts with GABA, and GABA prevents any dopamine secreted in the body to stay resonant in the body longer, so that the patient can utilize more of it. But check out his work, David Bierman. He's kind of one of the leading practical clinicians applying CBD to ADHD patients.
So can I, and I'm just scrolling through the chat. Anna asked about should CBD be used by MS patients as a preventative measure. I have a number of MS patients who use cannabis. So they're used to THC. And when I introduce them to CBD, they're a little skeptical. And this literally just happened to me a month ago. I handed a very close friend of mine in my neighborhood a bottle of CBD. She has MS, bad MS, and she tried it. She didn't really tell me anything about it, but then the bottle ran out. And then she realized how much the CBD had been helping her all along. And so, of course, we got her more CBD. But sometimes the effect is so subtle that, and I've heard this a couple of different times, it's so subtle that they don't notice until they stop using it. And, you know, I don't ever recommend somebody quitting a therapy unless they've used it for up to 6 weeks. Because, you know, again, the cannabinoids are lipophilic, they stay in your body, they build up a store. You really shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, you know, if somebody's tried it for a week and they're like, oh, that doesn't work. And of course, that's always a difficult thing to do with patients taking supplements, but, you know, that's kind of where I go with this.
I'm going to just pause for a second. We are at the top of the hour, and I wanted to first of all, thank everybody again for joining us. We are going to be emailing out a link to the recording of this webinar. As well, we'll take a look at the questions on the chat panel and find other ways to start answering these for you. But Eileen and Kurt are available to hang out, and Jim Sharkey as well. Jim, thanks for managing the chat panel, to continue answering questions. If you have some more, you're welcome to hang out. But for people who need to leave, just know we're going to email the recording.
Okay, so can I answer? So Megan asked about blood sugar control and type 1 diabetes. I have a number of people that talk about diabetes and trying to control their blood sugars and diet and different things with CBD, and it's not anything that I recommend. I've talked to people who have been trying it or tried it, and basically I asked them, so how are your blood sugars? And they're like, oh, they're all over the place. And I'm like, okay, well then please stop. So we don't have the research to show that it really works yet. I definitely know that it can be really helpful with the inflammation that's associated with, you know, the side effects of diabetes. So I definitely suggest that it can help with, you know, the neuropathic pain and some of the long-term effects that diabetes causes in the body. But we still need a tremendous amount of research out there to get ahead of that.
Great. Any other questions, Kurt or Eileen, that you think you could tackle here, or should we close it? And
I think I covered everything. This has been great.
Yeah, I think what's been interesting too about the questions is it's giving us some ideas about other topics that we might address in other ways, maybe a second webinar, et cetera. So again, I'll just say thank you. And we will have an email out later this week with the wrap up. So Eileen and Kurt and Jim, many thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can you save those questions?